And welcome to another live edition of Blacklisted Radio. It's good to be with you. My name is Doug Owen, and I am your host. Tonight, we have a bevy of topics. We will start with what is happening in Paris. Of course, you can be part of this interactive discussion. You can go to blacklistedradio.com, usually at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. Other times as well, exclusive content and other cool things that we do and plan on doing, especially into 2016. You can do that and find all of those very handy features, including social media handles, all of it. Blacklistedradio.com, interactive chat room with nice people hanging out there, the ambassadors of the show, unofficially. All right, so, you can, of course, sense the anger, the response, the violence that is in the air. Of course, I am talking about what happened in Paris. It's become a huge center stage story, rightfully so, and we've got a lot of thoughts on what has happened. Of course, there's a lot of the immediate whodunit crowd that rushes to look at insignificant or maybe very, very short-lit or self-interested motives for going after targets, especially in politics. And by that I mean, of course, politicizing, or as Winston Churchill said and is often quoted by many neocons and other crazy people in the government, that you should never let a good crisis go to waste. So this is not a good crisis. This is a pivotal crisis for policymakers and political leaders. So bear that in mind. Just about everything from the passports to, always have to get into the passports. We'll get there, but they become the death card of the investigation. And so there have already been some interesting twists and turns in that narrative. And of course, everything that's being put into the mainstream media from politicians, from CIA assets that are the go-to people doing all of the Sunday shows. And I'm sure some of you listening have heard the punditry, and the reaction is, it's more violence, more money for the military-industrial complex, more security, and for the American people and the people of the world, it's more security theater. That being said, very interesting things that we took away from this event. Most of you would probably consider, and I would as well, this to be France's equivalent in the 21st century of 9/11. And immediately I look at the targets, which were all soft targets in this case, and the only thing that really is close that we have seen in Europe in the last 60, 70 years is what was happening while NATO was conducting Operation Gladio. So during Gladio, you can look it up. Wikipedia has a pretty sanitized version of the history, but does make some references to claims and the Swiss and Belgian inquiries by Parliament into operations by the CIA in bombing trains, buses, other public areas with the intent to not target state infrastructure or police, anything like that, but to hurt people and really create this what they called a strategy of fear, a strategy of tension. And it worked very, very well. So that is what has happened, regardless of really who done it, the outcome, and the people that will ultimately seize carpe evil, or not to say carpe diem, but carpe evil. Those that seize on this event will be the true winners. So looking at Operation Gladio, it smacks of this, and that doesn't really necessarily mean a lot here today, but there's some really interesting takeaways of course, the Jewish owner of the Bataclan, who bought it in 1976, just sold it 2 months before. I saw the article here from the Times of Israel, and one thing kind of stood out to me, and that is that the owner that was targeted by anti-Zionist groups, they are very, I guess, vocal Zionists, and the brother said that he was talking with people in the club while this was happening and could hear shots being fired. And it just struck me because I just thought how odd that would be that, somebody inside of the venue would decide to call him, of all people. I mean, I would think I would call my family, I would call the police, I'd be calling, I don't know, I don't think I would be calling former owners. And so, those kind of things don't mean a lot, but they could mean everything. You know what I mean? When it comes to these stories, it strikes me as odd. A lot of anomalies there. Of course, you have the band, which is, it couldn't be more appropriately named to be a target in this, the Eagles of Death Metal. Now, Friday the 13th, finding Eagles of Death Metal at this club, targeting it, planning your attack around this so that you can use this I guess projection or meme is pretty advanced. And that's one of the things all of the pundits are saying, is that this is highly sophisticated. Many of these buzz terms, it's very coordinated. They would like you to think that Dr. Evil ISIS in Syria is coordinating these attacks, of course, because they are now the government's target. Whenever there's a terror attack on a state or within a state, there is a state response, and there's a new target. So anyway, back to the Eagles of Death. If you look at their song catalog, Wanna Be in L.A., I Want You So Hard, Boys Bad News, Cherry Cola, Anything Except the Truth, and Don't Speak, I Came to Make a Bang. Sound like, well, some really, really riveting music. I haven't listened. I didn't have a chance. But anyway, one of their band members, or one of the merchandise manager was killed in the attack. So I'm not making light of that. It just seems so over the top. I saw this at Jihadi Watch, and if you're not familiar with this character, Robert Spencer, he's the director of Jihadi Watch, a program of the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and author of 14 books, including, you'll love these, New York Times bestsellers, The Truth About Muhammad and the Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam. His latest book is complete with Infidel's Guide to ISIS, and coming in 2016, there will be the Complete Infidel's Guide to Iran. So anyway, this has been a popular meme or talking point, is that there is a historical significance to November 13th. Back in 1918, on November 13th, on November 13th, Allied troops occupied Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was the caliphate, the Islamic State of its day. And so if you look at some of the other background on this, other occupations took place all the way up to 1920. Also dating back to the Templars and the Crusades. So it's really interesting to see how some of these Zionist right-wing think tanks are trying to put these historical footnotes on this on this event. So not to say that there isn't some tie there, but the fact that you have this relevance being talked about on mainstream media really seems to be that they're trying to put this biblical context to me. And so, as always, we have the inconvenient truths about this. The French government, of course, knew about the extremists far before the attack, just like in the wake of the Charlie Hebdo attack, which left 12 dead. It was revealed that French security agencies tracked these guys for years, and at least one of them had been arrested 2 times. They incarcerated one. They actually tracked them overseas where they had trained with known terrorist organizations and then fought alongside them in Syria. So the police state is pretty ineffectual. Monitoring Twitter, listening to people's phone calls, everything that the state is doing. And I use the term broadly because there's just so many different types of sharing information programs. The New York Police Department is actually in an intel sharing operation with the French government. So they are very keyed in, or should be at least. So people are obviously looking at Holland and noticing that even after all of these freedoms have been seized by the state, still unable with all of that to protect the people. So, of course, when you look at this, them having Egyptian and Syrian passports, of course, that brings more international scrutiny and pressure on countries like, now being blamed Turkey. Now, Turkey, if you look at their role and what's happening in, of course, we all know now, and I'll clue you in if you haven't figured out, the target of the state in all of this is, of course, Syria. This is where it all goes back to, according to, the military response by Holland, the French prime minister, or president. He's a president. He's a socialist. He's one of those uber millionaires. He's socialism for you, but not so much for him. But he had a hope and change platform that they basically cut and paste from Barack Obama, and that seemed to work well. It won over the French people, at least according to their voting machines. But anyway, so they have started a massive bombardment. Of course, they've already blamed ISIS. They are attacking the quote-unquote capital of ISIS, which just happens to be in Syria. So the military response, they're sending their only aircraft carrier to fight alongside who? The United States. That is primarily in a quagmire, in a stalemate with Russia. So anyway, when you look at state-sponsored terrorism versus never letting a good crisis go to waste, we see immediately what the state's response is to this, regardless of the facts, regardless of the issue. Now, these soft targets, and of course, the growing financial strife, when you look at Paris itself, the socioeconomics, you have really nice areas in the center of the city, but in outlying areas, you have 6 million predominantly poorer Muslims living in this country, and waves of them coming by the day. The UN now estimates that 60,000. Is it 60,000? So yeah, excuse me. I'm always trying to shoot low. Up to 600,000 new Middle East immigrants will be entering Europe within the next 4 months. And of course, people are freaked out about this because there's no security or very little security. Part of globalization and the creation of a grander Europe has left them virtually with no physical borders. I mean, you have borders, but the idea of open and transparent and sharing economies and a dollar reserve note, all of those things would tear down those physical barriers. So it's not as simple as people may think, but we do have an invasion of people that are being cheered on by many in the financial world, because it is as much as you hate to admit it, most of modern Western civilization has been built on cheap labor. Now, the amount of cheap labor or government do jobs that will be created, because the economic disparity in many of these countries is creating a huge schism and will create more unrest as austerity measures, as well as just endless amounts of debt. I mean, obviously, France is not in a good financial situation, and it cost a lot of money to fight ISIS. So bear that and keep that in the back of your mind while we look at some of the other things, I guess, here. The striking timing for Holland to be at a soccer match that was targeted, but yet only on the exterior, rather than, actually, I mean, if they could, I don't see why they would not want to target political leaders, unless ultimately we go back to this notion that it is targeting innocent people and not the state, which just doesn't make sense to me. Now, when people riot, they don't necessarily go after the fat cats or the people in the really nice neighborhoods. A lot of times people just tear up their own stuff, which never makes sense to me. People do that. So, just because things don't make sense doesn't mean that people won't do it. But it just seems like really bad timing, or, great timing. As much coordination went into the other aspects of this, which, you have several guys, 10 guys with a watch that all decide to do something, within, 10 seconds of each other. Seems pretty reasonable. If you have a watch, I don't know how coordinated that has to be. This could be done, over a cup of coffee. But the fact that they want you to believe that it is the Leviathan, it's coming from the central ISIS command center, the capital that just happens to be in Syria, I think is the most telling aspect of this. Now, Turkey has been a problem because they have used opportunities to, when they have been given the go-ahead to attack ISIS in Syria, going after the Kurds. One of the grander, I think, strategies, because to oust Assad, to bring about regime change and accepting this new role in some transitional government, this daydream, or maybe one maybe it's not a daydream, maybe it will come to fruition in the next year or so. Maybe more events like this will give the French government all the excuse in the world to help its NATO partner, us, in the United States, rather, in fighting inside of Syria. And if you think about this, they always talk about international norms, and that is why Russia and all of these countries are being demonized selectively, and that is because they are going outside of the international norms. And I think, wow. There's one country that has been invited to actually bomb inside of Syria, and that's Russia. The only country that the Syrian government, like them, love them, hate them. I feel none of those things for them, but they are being invaded by many NATO countries. So what is that norm? We'll get into it and take your phone calls. A whole lot more coming your way. Don't go anywhere. It's Blacklisted Radio. All right, welcome back. It's Blacklisted Radio. And did I mention the date? It's the 15th day of November 2015, the day after Friday. Actually, the Sunday after Friday the 13th, when we saw these attacks in Paris. So, when looking at this, talking about the event, looking at the new strategy, the new targets, Of course, it's going to be a great way to further expatriate people from France. Right now, they have a lot of domestic issues as far as right-wing nationalists going after and targeting Zionists and other groups of people. Not that they're doing it inaccurately. I'm not critical. I think that when you look at the policy, especially what is being done, not only in places like Palestine, which of course is getting a lot of attention in left-wing press. If you turn on Democracy Now, it's always talking about Palestine and apartheid and demonizing Israel, at least in that soft light, if you will. So the amount of people that are leaving, like the former owner, has really accelerated, considering that there is a lot of anger, there is a lot of political opposition, and we're seeing, just recently in Poland, they did not left, or was it Poland? I hate to be, I'm pretty sure they had a recent government that was not allowed. I shouldn't cite it, but the government basically did not allow a nationalist, anti-skeptic, anti-EU government to take power, although they were democratically elected. And it's kind of like the Lisbon Treaty, where the Irish didn't want to sign on, and they said no, and they voted it down, and the EU just kept doing this over and over again. Sooner or later, we'll make that deal. And it only took 3 or 4 votes before they finally acquiesced and allowed the EU to, of course, usurp more power from the national governments, which is, it's become quite a problem with these new outside institutions and getting the buy-in from the people. Of course, with austerity, of course, with the new direction towards really, I think, putting the financial nail in the coffin for many of the countries is coming up in Paris. The IMF, the World Bank, just recently had a sit down in Lima, Peru, where they talked about this new carbon tax. And believe you me, when it comes to, that's a fun saying, believe you me, when it comes to people like Christine Lagarde and their push to have this external regulation over the internal politics and basically the financial control over countries is something that has been sought after for so many years by so many creepy, evil people in the New World Order. This is something that will, I think, ultimately backfire. I'm ultimately optimistic. The calls by people to rearm the French, to rearm the European citizens, is being really seriously considered. At some point, terrorism jumps the shark if the government continues to let things happen as part of a strategy of fear or just inemptus, the inability to protect, the inability to take millions upon billions upon trillions of dollars invested in an infrastructure designed to protect people from, let's just put it out there. Well-known terrorists, bad guys, then the purpose of the state is lacking. Of course, they'll probably try to use, encryption, going after your communications and justifying the constant watch of Big Brother in every aspect of your life, from your TV to your freaking iPhone to your Facebook chats. Whatever it is, personal communications. Even if they know that you're talking about terrorism, the inability to intervene in a meaningful way is on display. So, the attack on Syria, I was mentioning that going into the break, you have the Saudi Arabians, you have the Jordanians, you have the Israelis, you have the Turks, you have the Egyptians, all bombing and conducting military operations inside the international borders or national borders rather of the Syria, which I mean should be unprecedented. It's not a norm, but I guess it is a norm. See, we're all on the grid now. We're all together. There is an emergency alert. My phone is going off. It's telling me that there is a Amber Alert in Fort Worth, Texas. If you're in Texas, your phone's going off too. I bet Ken, working there at RBN, has his phone going off there at the station. Let's see. 2001 red Trailblazer. Well, be on the lookout. Be on the lookout. I mean, I'm only 400 freaking miles away from there. But anyway, it might be relevant. I might see a red Chevy. But that's the kind of update and warning systems you get. Oh, hey, we're in the break. That's okay.
Viruses, mold, and yeast. Supernatural silver can be taken orally or used topically.
I hear a bumper and
music. Or
vaporizer.
It's
pretty awesome.
With over 180 scientific studies by
I heard a bumper and a commercial rolling together.
Research institutions,
the Rolling Stones and a rolling bumper.
Weapon against disease.
Oh yeah, we got a new advanced clock here. Throwing me some curves? That's all right, Ken. I still love you there back at the studio. 800-313-9443 is the number that you can use to chime in. You can also tweet at me. BLN Radio is the handle. You can also go to blacklistedradio.com and join some fine folks in there talking about the Rothschilds and other cool stuff. So beyond what's happened in Paris, and of course the biggest thing to take away from this is that this is an easy way for the Syrian government to justify helping the U.S., intervening in Syria, and continuing to push against the proxy, which is Syria, to Russia. A lot of demands, a lot of international anger with the Russians taking on those moderate CIA-funded, and I think they said that the cost of vetting some of these guys was well over $1 million a piece. I mean, don't get a lot for $1 million from the government anymore. Not a lot of great intel. If you knew it was going to be this bad, I would have just chosen liberty. I need to make that bumper sticker because that's really the big point for me to take away is that, despite the billions of dollars we've given the government, despite all of the things that they are doing to protect the American people, the problem seems to be not that they don't have intelligence. It's that they don't have real intelligence. I mean, people putting Facebook, some Twitter image with a pro-ISIS GIF being arrested, a blogger, just last week. That's ridiculous. Those are ridiculous things because they do not promote jihad. If anything, they probably seem pretty stupid. They trying to stop the proponents of ISIS just seems kind of counterintuitive because the people that would actually resonate with that are so deeply, darkly stupid or desperate. Especially in the Western world, these are people that probably couldn't tie their own shoes, have no life, have no money, resources. I mean, not a lot of well-to-do, really smart, chemical engineer types, buying into the ISIS cell. It's not a good sell, and it's just I hate to make light of it, but if you really think about it, it really has to make a lot of not make a lot of sense to think that those kind of people would go towards that. I mean, you don't find really, really bright doctors looking for jobs, freedom fighting because they're making so much money. It's very rare that you find people that are willing to bomb and commit senseless violence. And if there were a huge amount of these people, the government would actually find some of them. I mean, not just one or two of them, not just people talking about it, but you would actually find some really bright, intelligent people that were working in a coordinated fashion. I mean, at least once. Not the Liberty 7 where the guy, they ended up pinning him with a weapon of mass destruction that was his shoe because he planned on throwing it at a government building. Or the NATO 3, you had a bunch of anarchists making Molotov cocktails at the Republican convention, National Convention a few years ago. Only able to do it because, they're being fed drugs and, hanging out full time with no jobs and only, FBI friends. I mean, those kind of people are the ones that would be true targets or would be not true targets, rather, in a real war on terror. So, people that I guess are trying to learn from this, and that's what it's always about, right? The learning from this event. What have we learned? What have we learned, kids? What was the meaning of all of this? What should we do? It's when it comes to Pavlovian programming, it's pretty simple, and I see it all the time with my son's cartoons. It's not a bad thing necessarily. It's actually just a way that we justify the response. But when you find out what's happened, then what ends up being your response? How do you resolve the issue? You know what the problem is. You have a conflict. You have a problem. You have a response, and that's your reaction to find a solution. So what is the response for France? Well, the response is to blow up Syria, help the Kurds, put pressure on Turkey. That seems to be the message. Now, is that why this event happened? Quite frankly, it's hard to say. Probably, I will probably never know the absolute truth, because I am 37 years old, and it will be put in some memoir by an operator in 50 years. But it's safe to say that the people are not going to be more protected, because they'll be asking for more protections. They'll be asking for the UN's national biometric database to be used. They'll be begging for more vaccines to protect them from the plagues that are coming from all of these immigrants from the third world and from tattered, war-torn nations. Now, the response, the anger should be towards, of course, the military intervention that is taking place at the behest of the U.S. and why that is really at the crux of this. This anti-Russian agenda has a real toll that the European people will feel. And if they're not being automated like so many others, then they're going to be in competition with millions of other desperate people. So the government solution to this always is to make it seem that it's not as bad as it really is that they'll just give subsidies and free money to all of the people that are coming in and that are being registered. And then they'll have their Chinese-style social credit. Government will be watching them, making sure they're doing everything in line so they get their government checks. And they'll always be there. And they will use them to steer politics and to create schisms and to work at the disinterest of the people of those nations. That is usually the scam. It doesn't always work. It really doesn't. That's the good thing. My wife's family is a perfect example. Her father's a second-generation American, and he's a Mexican-American, Latin, whatever you think the proper term is. He doesn't care. Neither do I. But, he's very conservative. My mother-in-law is very conservative, and most of the Hispanic people that I meet, even first-generation Americans, become very conservative because they do care about the place that they live. And they came here because it was better. Now, to find out it's not better or it sucks, it's a blow to them too, especially people that went through all of the channels, the legal measures, or have been granted amnesty. That's where most people, come into any countries in waves. We're seeing that now in this country, and people in Europe are feeling it in a whole different type of way. So what the temporary solution will be is to create slave labor. Why? Because that's what imperialist governments have always done. Using the influx of migrants to create new, huge government projects. They will be building infrastructure that's desperately needed. They will be building and building and building. Because the two things government has to solve issues is war and government deficit spending and government works projects. People always hail World War II and what it did for this country, the Corps of Engineers, building the Intercoastal Canal, and all of the works projects that created tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs, probably millions in the aggregate. People hail that as a solution. And of course, it's war. How do you get rid of a lot of people? How do you get rid of a lot of cannon fodder? As well as pushing for a more centrist, government-focused solution? Well, you have war. So, unfortunately, that is what I see throughout history. That's the revolving storyline, the cycles. One of the people in the chat room mentioned it, that we live in interesting times, and I said, well, I don't know if we really do, because so many of these events, the problem, the reaction, the solution, regardless of who ends up being the culprit, are reoccurring events that just, it feels like Groundhog's Day. I feel like Bill Murray. I feel like I've been going through this over and over and over again. And the good thing is that when fear is the goal, when you want to create a strategy of tension, as NATO did in post-World War II Italy, then that fails. That ultimately does not produce the desired results. And so fear often, finally, once it becomes numbing, has no effect. It no longer has the power that it used to have. I mean, people, I think pretty ridiculous. Like U2. I hate U2. By the way, hate you, Bono. They have decided to cancel their concert in Paris. We have Motorhead, which I used to kind of like, and I guess whatever. I would already be skeptical about going out of the country myself. Maybe if I was Motorhead, but no, they've canceled. So that is really the effect of terror, where it changes the way you live your life, when it changes the amount of options that you have. Those are the real, consequences of this type of terror. So that said, we do have, interestingly enough, coming up in Paris, the 2015 summit, where Christine Lagarde's going to be talking more about that IMF $5.3 trillion that they're currently collecting from governments, and how they need this new carbon tax to be able to regulate the new economies and putting us on a path towards a sustainable world where global anthropomorphic climate change does not create terrorists. So, I don't know if you heard Bernie Sanders, but that guy, Bernie, he said, well, the CIA, the CIA says that the climate change is causing the jihadists to get angry and mad, and they're losing places to live, and it makes them very, very angry. And the CIA has a lot of papers on all sorts of convenient excuses as to why things suck where they do, and they all point away from the CIA and its clandestine operations and some of the outcomes of that. Speaking of which, I want to get to this before we end the show, and I might as well inject here. Decades after disappearing from Australia, a CIA-linked fugitive is found in Idaho. Now, you'd say, wow, they found this guy. Actually, it wasn't the police. Wasn't the CIA. CIA wasn't looking for a CIA banker, as a matter of fact. And I guess when you hear the story, it'll make more sense as to why the FBI either. But anyway, there was this gentleman who is still alive, and ProPublica did a piece. Peter Butt, an Australian writer who just released a book called Merchants of Menace, discloses Hand, who is the CIA frontman. His name is, what's his first name? I know his last name's Hand. It was John. His name is Michael Hand, and he had been living under the name Michael John Fuller. So he was Michael John Hand. He changed his last name, okay? And he didn't even bother changing his social security number. So anyway, this Australian writer said, yeah, it was real easy. I just kind of Google searched around, and I just happened to find this guy who is a fugitive. He's now 73, but he by doing this, he solved this huge mystery, which only leads to more questions. So how could have the United States known for so long, or how could he have lived here rather so long without him being detected? He's changed his name only slightly from Hand to Fuller and did not get this new social security number. His company, GMI Manufacturing, is registered with the Idaho State Secretary. The company now manufactures tactical weapons for U.S. Special Forces, Special Operations Groups, and hunters. But wrote, and he has had this is a tongue twister. Has Hand Fuller has been brazen, foolish, and or but asked, does he not belong to a protected species, most likely of the intelligence world? So when it comes to the BCCI scandal, the CIA running drugs to narco-terrorists, murderers, killers, I mean, this goes right back to Bush. It was a real big deal in the 90s and late 80s, but I know that some of our younger listeners may not know about the BCCI scandal, but you should definitely look into it. This guy was the head of this CIA bank that was contributing to terrorists that had killed civilians, and he just pops up one day and decides, I know the government's looking for me, and I'm a CIA fugitive from Australia, but I'm going to start this tactical weapons company and sell guns to my buddies, but they won't know that it's me. I mean, how funny is that? They'll never catch on. I'll be right underneath their noses. I mean, the story seems pretty fantastical, and it's just not true. This guy has been operating for years, and there are many more people like him that I'm sure, maybe even living in your neighborhood, around the corner, that nice guy that seems really militarized, that may be international terrorists and killers for the state. So when I talk with people about, these, events, like what has happened, what's transpired in Paris, I always feel, I guess, a little hesitant to tell them, well, it's quite obviously, or most likely, a state-sponsored terrorist event, more times than not. Not every event that happens on planet Earth that is horrific, that is, I think, a game changer in a lot of ways, like this event, is coordinated by the central bankers in the intelligence, world, profiting from their bets and their corporate recipients of this, welfare, warfare, statecraft, welfare. Not every time, but most times there are people that always win when they seize these opportunities, and many of them benefit, and it has been the record. The state has killed and used people as human guinea pigs as long as I can remember. It's pretty undebatable. I mean, the government tests chemical weapons on its own soldiers. It tested nuclear weapons on its own soldiers. If you don't think that they would shoot up a bar full of people with any kind of, compassion, you're just dead wrong. So you have to, kind of put that out there beforehand that you do understand, to have this conversation, you have to accept some of those things as complete truths because they're undebatable, and it does paint. I think that the biggest benefactors obviously would be the people that you would look at first. I mean, if an insurance company, if you get in a wreck, or if an insurance company looks at whether or not they have to pay you, they're going to look at the situation and look at every way not to. It just makes no sense. So there's that. Got a few other stories I wanted to mention here. Got still 11 minutes, so it's not like we're dying for topics considering where we're at in the world today. With some other news stories that are well worth mentioning is NDAA 2016, something that is not going to be debated, something that is just waiting Barack Obama's approval, which will give an estimated $6.7 billion to the welfare queens and the military-industrial complex, and more money to to provide weaponry for the Ukraine, and so much more. We'll talk about it on the other side. This is Blacklisted Radio. I think it's Blacklisted Radio. There it is. All right, there is a bumper. Nice. That's what I thought I heard. All right, more in moments. Final segment on the other side. Well, people are always looking for money in the government, and there's some new technology, some new ways to do it. A lot of people probably don't know that the Senate just voted to legalize space mining. And I just find this to be such a hubris, such a, pompous assness from people in the Senate, in the U.S. government. I mean, the point is that you think that you have the right to everything. I mean, it's just so characteristic of what you would expect from the U.S. government. So anyway, after much delay, an important space bill has finally passed the Senate. That's right. The Space Act of 2015 would do a lot of things to encourage the private space industry, including extending the learning period, wherein fledgling spaceflight companies can operate without too much government oversight. It would also give companies the rights to the resources they may one day extract from asteroids, such as platinum and water and other cool stuff. So I guess the push to privatize and to commodify space is on its way, and it shows you the focus, doesn't it? I mean, I think it's more symbolic than anything for me that, they are looking for any which way they can suck a few dollars out of and create some ingenuity out of, the entrepreneurial class, people out there, the upstarters. It seems that anything you do, the eagle of death has its claw in you. So there you go. Interesting note: the shift has already happened in Oregon. There are now more marijuana shops than Starbucks or McDonald's. McDonald's doesn't surprise me as much, just because I think of people in Oregon, and maybe this is just a misconception, but I always think of them as more a thinking class of people up there, and it's like and there's no really great reason. I mean, I've been to Oregon and I've met a lot of smart people there, but that's not to say that I think that they're just more aware. But the Starbucks does. In the state of Oregon, where marijuana for recreational purposes is legal, they legalized it just a month ago, there are already more retail shops than there are McDonald's or Starbucks. So talk about a startup opening opportunity. People are, they can create their own markets, their own economy. The government just has to continue to remain relevant by charging people, taxing people to literally grow a plant. And in this day and age, as evolved as we are politically and emotionally, I mean, people, we need safe spaces, and we're so much more grown up now, I guess. All of these things that have happened, we've been emasculated on the college campuses. That's what I saw this week. A bunch of people that didn't know why they were mad. So confused. It's not really that it's race. I'm tired of paying for this college. Worthless degree. I feel your pain. I would be out there too, my friends. But it is a wake-up call. Bashar al-Assad said something that it's thought-provoking. He said, what's happened in Paris happens every day in Syria, all the time. Nobody's crying for those people. It's a true point from a guy that used to torture people for the U.S. government. All right, guys, that is my time. Thank you so much for being part of it. You can, of course, find us at blacklistedradio.com, YouTube, iTunes, all of those places. And until next week, take care.